The title is The Refugee Crisis, Europe at the Crossroads. And I would like to start with a photograph. On September the 2nd in 2015, the European refugee crisis really got a face, an icon. During the course of the day, this photograph, the photograph of a small dead body lying face down at the Turkish seaside resort of Bodrum, went around the globe and was, as the Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu put it, was perceived as the loss of innocence. The body of Alan Kurdi, soon became the iconic image of one of the greatest challenges Europe has encountered since the end of the Iron Curtain, a challenge far from being resolved. The 3-year-old boy was one of several casualties on that trip, among them his older brother and also his mother, who all drowned off the coast of Turkey as they tried to reach the EU by boat. They were heading towards the Greek island of Kos, like thousands of men, women and children before them, and later, and still today. I will come to the actual situation between Turkey and Greece in a few minutes. The tragic incident of Alan stands for a huge number of likewise destinies. Alan Kurdi's family had tried to escape the Syrian civil war and the threat of the self-proclaimed Islamic State. Alan was one of over 1.3 million refugees who came to Europe in 2015. 49% of those came from Syria, and another big group coming from Afghanistan and from Iraq. Almost one-fourth of these 1.3 million were children in 2015. Here I show you the major routes that those who wanted to flee from Syria took. And you can see that young Alan, he tried the route from Turkey to Greece and then from Greece further on to Europe. Most of the people, by the way, tried from Greece into Macedonia and then through the Balkan into Hungary, Austria and Germany. Already in 2014, the UN had reported that the number of refugees would, for the first time in the post-World War era, exceed 50 million people worldwide. And the increase was substantially driven by the war in Syria and by the activities of ISIS. Although in Europe a majority of politicians and citizens have expressed, and still today express, their sympathy, their helpfulness, concepts like Fortress Europe are also being revived and have gained substantial advocates. At the latest regional elections in Germany, we could see that a party like AfD, I will come to that, Alternative for Germany, has gained a lot of votes. And in other European countries, such as France, Switzerland, Poland, even Sweden and Finland, there are parties now that openly focus on a policy of not taking in more refugees. Europe's historical experience after the Second World War might perhaps explain why there are such ambiguous reactions to the current crisis, ranging from shouts of welcome. Let me go to the shouts of welcome. This is a photograph taken in front of the main station in Munich, ranging from shouts of welcome and a surprisingly high commitment to help on the one hand, and to xenophobia, to expressions of disdain and even hatred on the other hand. This is a photograph that was taken in Dresden with one of the Pegida demonstrations that have been taking place now in Dresden and in Leipzig. I am far from attempting to whitewash problems occurring with incoming refugees and migrants who, as you would expect and know, often have an entirely different horizon of experience and values, who often do not share our belief in equal rights for men and women, who often cannot even read or write, but who most often carry the burden of traumatic experiences after they decided to flee from their home. I think we are all encouraged to address these problems without polemics, and I will not shy away from telling you about these problems. I'm quite ready to admit what many German and European citizens felt in fall and early winter last year. They felt that the government had lost control, that even the government in Germany had lost control and would not know who had entered the country, who had gone where, who would ask for asylum finally, and who would have a chance to gain asylum. And they didn't even know how many refugees would still be admitted. We in Germany experienced a dramatic loss of confidence in the political elite. Chancellor Merkel, until the first half of 2015 very successful with voters, suffered from this development and lost, even she, lost much of her support and approval, even within her own party, the Christian Democratic Union, leaving aside for a while the loss of confidence in the brother party, the Bavarian branch, the CSU. With the attacks in Paris last November, many more Germans started to worry about whom we had let in. Terrorists, fanatic Muslims eager to kill Western people and to attack Western values, or helpless families eager to save their children from war and crime. People started to ask, is immigration a menace to society or a blessing? Even though many German citizens and politicians have until now perceived Germany as a non-immigration country, I think history proves them wrong. In the aftermath of the Second World War, millions of people immigrated to post-war Germany. In 1950, we had received almost 12 million people in the two Germanys, people from East Prussia, from Silesia, from parts of Romania, from those parts of Europe that had a German past up until the end of the Second World War. 12 million people. And when I mentioned the inner German migration from the GDR in the east to the Federal Republic in the west, I must tell you that 4.6 million people left the GDR between 1949 and 1990 and moved west, another 4.6 million. And the next major phase of immigration began quite early, late 50s, beginning of the 60s, the so-called Virchows Window. Until the beginning of the 1970s, millions of guest workers, mainly from the Mediterranean countries, were actively recruited by German companies and government authorities. But they were expected to leave the country after a couple of years. I must show you this photograph. This was the 1 millionth guest worker who had entered Germany, I think it was in 1965. And you know, he was presented with a Zünder moped when he arrived. Just imagine this young man coming from Portugal, coming to Germany because he had been recruited by a company in Munich. And then when he arrived in Munich, there were these politicians offering him a Zünder moped. You know, that used to be a very nice Bavarian company. They produced mopeds up until the 1980s. Then the company was sold to China. So this moped does not exist anymore. I don't know about him, whether he still exists. But you see, that was in the early 60s when we were so happy to have guest workers. But we expected them, I mean, we, the German government, expected these people to leave the country after a couple of years. When the German government in 1973 sought to regulate the influx of guest workers, almost 3 million guest workers already lived in Germany. And most of them soon regarded the very country that they had helped to become an economic superpower again, of course, they regarded this country as their new home. And since then, since the 70s, Germany has spent a lot of time in discussing whether it should perceive itself as an immigration country or not, whether it should have an immigration policy, a clear procedure of selection whom to let in and whom not to allow to enter. The historical events linked to the decline of the Soviet Union and the coinciding Yugoslav wars marked the next major influx of migrants. In the 1990s, some 4.5 million ethnic German migrants, Aussiedler, were registered in Germany. These 4.5 millions with German roots all came from the East, especially from the former Soviet Union. And they just had to fill in a form and have some documents that they had some German origins, but these German origins very often dated back to the 18th century, and they were just documented by a German shepherd dog that they still had at home. So another 4.5 million came to Germany. I tell you all this to make sure that you understand that in 2014, roughly 16 million of the 81 million people living in Germany had a migration background. And as you can see from this chart, for over 70 years, Germany has been one of the countries receiving high numbers of immigrants. To be honest, receiving the highest number of immigrants in the world next to the United States and to Russia. It is, I think, beyond doubt that Germany is an immigrant country. And I think that should give us some idea, some hope that Chancellor Merkel is quite right. We can manage. We have an experience as an immigrant country. And very similar to that experience is the experience, of course, in France. The colonial power that had to take in so many people from their colonies in the 60s, the many people from Algeria. It's also true for Portugal. Portugal had to take in many, many people from the Portuguese colonies in the 60s. But now, let us focus on the actual crisis. As early as November last year, the media in Germany announced that they expected around 1 million migrants newly arriving to Germany in 2015 alone. And they were right. More than 1 million, or about 1 million, really came in the year 2015. Meanwhile, in the wake of the Refugee Summit in Brussels in March 2016, the numbers have declined. 90,000 people came in January, 60,000 in February, and 20,000 in March. So 170,000 newly arrived in 2016. But we should not forget, winter is the most dangerous time for crossing the Mediterranean Sea on these small boats and even rubber dinghies that they have. By now, more than 650,000 immigrants applied for asylum in Germany. 650,000. I can give you a chair, so then you don't have to stand up all the time.
Thank you, but don't worry.
It will go on for another 25 minutes.
Okay, I sit all day. Thank you.
Okay. We do not know how many refugees, beyond these 650,000 who already have sought asylum now, will still seek asylum. Many of the remaining 500,000 will. Some, however, may move on to other countries, some may return, And many of them, perhaps even most of them, will not be eligible for asylum. Not eligible for asylum because they come from the Balkans, they come from Morocco, from Algeria, from Tunisia, from countries where they will be sent back. If I go once again to here, you can see you have the European map, and you can see that people coming from Morocco, from Algeria, will be sent back, as these countries are not considered to be countries where we should give asylum to their residents if they come to Germany or to other European countries. How will we deal with these figures? And we must think that figures are individuals. So how will we deal with these individuals? And what will happen if the number of migrants coming to Germany in 2016 will not be less than that in 2015? There might be 1 million again, as there are already new groups of migrants approaching. People coming from Libya. And I will tell you in a moment why so many people now try to come from Libya. And they come via Sicily or this small island, Lampedusa, which already belongs to Italy. And then they have entered Europe. With this problem, all European countries wonder whether they should see the refugees as a threat or an unexpected chance. And we in Germany, we must really wonder and think about the fact that the young asylum seekers bring with them an enormous potential for aging Germany. And I will show you something about this potential here. Look, these are the immigrants who came to Germany in 2015 and who sought asylum up until the first week in 2015. So this is an old number. It's now 650,000. But you see, when you look at the men, that most of the men who came are below the age of 25. If you add up these two columns here, you see that already almost 56% are below the age of 25, and if you include this group, then you see how young these men are. When you look at the women, you will be surprised that 41% of the women are under the age of 18. So very, very young people enter Germany. As chairman of a foundation, I can give you an idea of what German civil society has started to do now, how the help has changed from first help with giving them shoes and blankets and something to eat and to drink, from now helping them with German lessons for everybody, with school education for the kids, and educational and vocational programs for the young adults. But before I go on with that, let us have a very close look at the situation today. I already mentioned the decline in numbers in March. And this is to a great extent due to a contract that Europe concluded with Turkey. The deal with Turkey was at the core of the strategy of Chancellor Merkel. And it looks as if her strategy was successful. The contract with Turkey helped her tremendously, and the recent polls show that she got the confidence of her voters and non-voters back. But there is a big but. She made the deal with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And I don't have to explain to you why one should be cautious when dealing with the president of Turkey, whose strong adherence to the rule of law, to democracy and the value of a free press is certainly beyond question. The contract with Turkey says, starting in June this year, Turkish citizens might enter Europe without a visa. Second, Brussels will renew the EU accession negotiations with Turkey. Third, Turkey will receive 6 billion euro as support for the refugees in Turkey, 6 billion euro. Fourth, Turkey will take back the refugees who have landed on the Greek islands after March 28th. That means they will take back those who have already set foot on European territory. Turkey will take them back, and once they are back in Turkey, the European Resettlement program starts. A program that Chancellor Merkel has really worked on for many, many months. And the program is a program right now with 7 more European countries, and it means that those whom Turkey has taken back will then be resettled in these 8 European nations, 8 European countries. Germany, Finland, Benelux, Italy, and there's one more. So, with these refugees, just think of them. They have already set foot on Greece, now they are taken back, and then the first week it was 300 people, and 77 out of these 300 people were then resettled and taken to Germany and to France by plane, so not on these terrible voyages anymore, to start life over there. But we all think that the contract bears a high price. Especially the chairman of the Christian Social Union Party, Horst Seehofer, he is furious about the fact because he thinks that now the problems of Turkey, the inner problems of Turkey, will also hit Germany and will hit France and other countries. And the problem is the problem between Turkish people and Kurd people. And we have quite a high population of Kurdish people in Munich, in Nuremberg. So he, and also in Cologne, and many others are afraid that now there will be riots between Turkish people and Kurdish people, as the Turkish people can enter Germany without a visa. And to be quite honest, to take people back to Turkey is also something that you don't feel very easy about, because Turkey has already taken in 3 million refugees from Iraq and Syria. And Turkey is not a very wealthy country. And 3 millions who live in camps in Turkey is really a hard burden for this country. So, in a way, Europe sends back the program to Turkey, to a country we do not feel very comfortable with. So it doesn't really seem a very fair or fine solution. And President Erdogan already threatened last week to skip the contract if the Europeans would not fulfill their promises. And when you see the pictures of the poor Syrian refugees who still wait in Idomeni in Greece, it was yesterday on the New York Times, the photograph at the front page of Idomeni. Idomeni is a very small town between Greece and Macedonia, and there for almost 2.5 months now, a group of 11,000 people from Syria wait for entrance to the northern parts of Europe. And they live in a very, very bad camp there, but the Macedonians have closed down the borderline, and they even do it in a very aggressive way. And on, people in the camp have tried to cross the border and have been refused by force. So to be quite honest, I feel, being a Christian and having lived in Christian Europe, I really feel ashamed about the whole situation. But at the same time, I must tell you that I feel the dilemma as well. And I think that's a feeling that most of my countrymen in Europe share with me. It's both. It's a shame about the situation, a shame that we do not come to a solution, and it's at the same time the recognition of a dilemma. The dilemma is not alleviated by what you might presume to be European solidarity. As Europe has been under stress for many years now, there is a lack of enthusiasm among many, many people in Germany, in France, in Great Britain, and in other countries about Europe. And if you think back of the Greek crisis, it was a very hard time for Germany. I would always back the position of Frau Merkel and Herr Schäuble in that crisis. But it did not go very well with our other friendly neighbor countries in Europe. They thought that Germany would not feel solidarity, would not be solidarious, with the other countries, but would be very hard and tough and would say the Greek have to pay it back, you know. So when we started to have problems with the many refugees trying to come into Germany, of course we could not really count on the solidarity of all the other countries around us, because they felt that we had lacked solidarity with them in the financial crisis, so they were not all that too eager to be now of solidarity with Merkel. And then Merkel said this famous sentence, "We can manage, we can do." So I think many European countries thought, well, if Merkel has such an idea, a little bit loud-mouthed, then she must see how she can do it. So you see, it's not an easy situation for Europe right now. And with the Brexit before us in June, there might even be the chance that Europe will not be, at the end of the year, what it was at the beginning of the year. And the same lack of solidarity and the same problematic situation now occurs at the Austrian-Italian frontier. You will know, most of you will know the Brenner. Let me see. Well, not little. Austria over there, and the Brenner. The Brenner is the famous pass between northern Italy and Austria. And the Austrians decided to block the Brenner, to close the border, and not to allow any more refugee to enter the country. They did this in February, March, and I must tell you that the Swedish people, they even did the same, they decided the same in January, which was something I was really surprised, because Sweden has a tradition of being a very liberal, very social democratic country. And they also decided they would not take in any more refugees. So did the Austrians. And Frau Merkel did not react friendly to the Austrian decision, but I think her reaction was somehow hypocritical. You know, the advantage is I'm the chairman of a foundation, I can be that open to you, whereas the vice consul who is sitting over there, Herr Bloß, he is a member of the German government, he must be more cautious about these things. Or not. Or not. So, you know, I'm really a fan of what Frau Merkel does, but I think in this situation she was somehow hypocritical. The Austrians are afraid of the new refugee route via Libya to the island of Lampedusa, Sicily, and then Italy. Because the Austrians think that the Italian government would feel it very easy, would not see it as a big difficulty to give all the immigrants who have entered Sicily a single ticket without return to the Brennero to send them up north. Because Italy is a rather poor country, has already taken in lots of refugees, and they just don't want any more. So they will give them a railroad ticket, and then the people will come up here to the Brennero, which is the most northern station, and try to enter the northern parts of Germany. So the Austrians thought we better block the gateway to the north, we better block the gateway to Austria and to Germany. I think we should be grateful that little Austria gave the sign of no entrance. Otherwise, I'm sure it would have been us, Germany. I'm convinced that the Grand Coalition, the Christian Democratic Union and the SPD, that form a Grand Coalition in the federal government, that the Grand Coalition knows exactly what is at stake in Germany. They know that we can manage. The famous parole du jour of Frau Merkel would not work again, because there has grown a lot of opposition, of worries, of insecurity within the German population. The president of Bavaria, Herr Seehofer, already in November wanted a cap to the number of immigrants we would allow to come in. He urged to set a cap in order to discourage people in Afghanistan and in Syria and in Iraq who were more and more encouraged to flee by ruthless people smugglers, people traders in their country. And then at the same time there is the rise of the alternative for Germany, the AfD party, a new right-wing party strongly opposing not only further immigration but also opposing globalization and opposing a united Europe. And this AfD gained quite considerable votes in 3 regional elections. Suddenly it occurred that with the next federal elections there might not even be a majority for the Grand Coalition because of the Christian Democratic Party, something around 30%, and the SPD party perhaps less than 20%, and that would be seen as a kind of catastrophe for Germany. Too many people, too many voters openly said that they are afraid of Muslim invasion, of aggressive young Islamist Muslim men who do not know how to cope in a liberal Western society. Think of the fact that in some parts of Berlin, where there is a growing Jewish community, the Jewish men were advised not to wear a kippah any longer. And I think, that is something that we really have to take very seriously. And don't forget what happened in Cologne, New Year's Eve. I think the American papers also covered this. The fact that Arab-looking young men, and most of them did not come from Syria, and did not come from Iraq, but came from northern Africa. The fact that Arab-looking young men sexually assaulted young women on the plaza in front of Cologne main station had a huge impact on our population. The fact itself was bad enough, but what enraged the German public most was the fact that the Cologne authorities tried everything to keep it secret. And even German public broadcasting, and we are so proud of our public broadcasting situation in Germany, the public broadcasting, the WDR, is located just across this plaza. They would have seen it just looking out of their window. They did not report the incident before January the 5th, when they no longer could keep it under the carpet. German public was furious and thought it was government policy to keep the public uninformed about these incidents, as German politicians were afraid that news like this would sparkle off offense against the Muslim immigrants and would start opposition against the immigrant policy of the Grand Coalition. The effect was also a catastrophe for German media. It was named Lügenpresse, lying press, Lügenpresse, by the AfD people and by many others. And Lügenpresse originally is a Nazi propaganda expression. The Nazis said at the beginning of their term in 1933, don't believe the free press, it is controlled by Jews and by communists. It's a Lügenpresse. That was the Nazi propaganda in 1933. And now the right-wing people said, don't believe the press, they lie, they cheat you, they are in league with these politicians who sell our country to Islamist terrorists. And don't forget that just about 6 weeks before, we had the big attack in Paris, with 130 people being killed. So the whole situation in France and in Germany and in Belgium, of course, was a very, very difficult one, and it still is. When you go to Paris, you can really sense it, that people over there are very much afraid of new terrorist attacks. Whereas in Germany, people are not that much afraid of terrorist attacks. They just see the broader picture and they see their Christian country going somewhere where they don't want it to go to. But it's not so much the worries of terrorism as you find it in Brussels, in Belgium, and in France. I have told you all this, the whole picture, in order to make you understand why I think that the Austrians, with their blockade, did something that is in the German interest, that they rather did Germany a favor when they did this. Because I do believe that we need in the social media, in the Arab countries, some news like it's very, very difficult now to enter Europe because the ISIS people tried everything to get people out of the country for a very high price. They finance the ISIS policy, the ISIS work, by sending these people on these small vessels to Italy or to Greece for a price like 5,000, 10,000 euro, a very, very high price. And as you know, many of them do never enter Europe because they are drowned. And I really think we have to do something against that. My idea for this dilemma, I know it's very, very difficult, is that we should try, once the situation in Syria has come to a certain point that you can deal with Syria, and there is a chance for that right now. As you know, there are talks now, the Russians take place, the Americans are part of the talks, the Syrians are, the Europeans are, even the Iranians are. And I think that in the end, there should be a solution that we have European centers in the north of Syria, or let's say international centers, international hotspots in the northern part of Syria, where people can apply for asylum to Europe and to the United States and to Canada. And then they are given asylum or not given asylum on these internationally covered areas, on these international grounds, and then they leave their country not on these vessels, not by paying ISIS money for that, but leaving the country on a stable boat or on an airplane, going to Canada, to the United States, to Frankfurt, to Paris, to London. I think that would be a much better solution, but I know it's very, very difficult. It's like a utopia that I talked about right now. Well, just a very short look at the falling numbers of new refugees, because they allow us now in Germany and in other countries to put all our energy into the question of how to integrate the 1 million immigrants as best as possible. And I must tell you, I'm a little bit proud of the fact that 10 out of 100 German citizens have been active in helping these newly arrived by being volunteers in the field of integration. I'll just give you one example. The foundation that I'm the CEO of, we have started a program with the University of Hamburg. We finance university students who commit themselves to be mentors to newly arrived kids. So a student, usually a student who wants to become a teacher, he applies and then he receives 335 euro every month, and he commits that he will work with 3 immigrant kids for 5 hours every week. So he goes to these special classes that we have in Hamburg right now for the newly arrived. The teacher tells him, these are the 3 kids I would like you to coach especially. And then the student, the university student, takes care of these 3 kids for a whole year. Right now we have about 180 university students, so we can help around 500 newly arrived immigrant kids. And this program has very, very quickly gotten momentum, and the German Ministry of Family Affairs has helped us with 1 million euro this year to increase the program, to expand the program. So there are now many joint efforts of privately established foundations, just as ours, and the many community foundations in Germany, and the Federal Ministry of Family, Women, Jugend und Soziales. Is that correct? Familienminister. They have these 4 things. It's so difficult with me. Frau Schwesig, yes, you know. Okay. So they really help us a lot with these programs, and I could give you ample examples, but I think we need some time for the discussion, so I skip this right now and just, I think I can skip this and just go to my epilogue. And the epilogue is, well, I already talked to you about the new Libya-Italy route, so you know about that. By the way, the EU made contracts with Morocco, with Algeria, and with Tunisia here. So people cannot leave the country, and if they do, they are taken back immediately, because these countries are supposed to be safe countries, as we feared that some people would try this route. You know, the Strait of Gibraltar. It's very narrow. If you are a good swimmer, you can even, well, no, you must be a very good swimmer. You can even do it by swimming. Okay, so we stopped this by these contracts with Morocco, but there is no possibility to make a contract with Libya. Libya is a failing state. There are two governments who try to govern Libya, and the ISIS people have already taken control of some parts. There are more than 3,000 ISIS people now in Libya, and many people try to get out of Libya, but many of them are not Libyans, because Libya was an oil-producing country, and many people from the western parts of Africa moved to Libya to find a job there, and now they try to get to Europe. But when they come from countries here in the west of Africa, they are considered that they should not be given asylum, so they will be sent back. Right now we sent back 60,000 people, not more. And I must tell you, 37,000 of these 60,000 returned voluntarily. It's very difficult to send someone whom you do not give asylum back to his or her home country. It is a huge effort. Okay, now to the epilogue. Yeah, I think what I wanted to do is, I wanted to let you know that there's really much at stake right now in Germany, in France, in Belgium, in Spain, and even in Great Britain. The refugee crisis, the many people entering our country with a very different perspective on certain values, made, however, many of us reflect again on Western ideas, thinking again what tolerance really means, what a great asset it is to have the rule of law, to live in a democratic state, equality of men and women, a free press, a secular state where everybody can be religious, or if he or she is not religious, it's fine as well. And I think this reflection on our values is something that I believe is very important. And our constitution in Germany, the Grundgesetz, well, that even asks for more. The first article of the Grundgesetz says that it wants us to see and preserve the dignity of man, the dignity of every human, everyone we meet, in everything we do. And dignity of man, that is really something beyond or below, at the bottom of any legal order. Something that cannot be derived from rules or regulations how to run a nation. It is something that our federal president, who used to be a Protestant person in Germany, Herr Gauck, once called, it is something heilig, something holy, something saint. Dignity of man does not make our decisions how to deal now with the refugee crisis easier. It remains a thorn, ein Stachel, to make us think very deeply before we act in this situation. Thank you very much for your attention.